As we're approaching October, I thought it would be fun to join in on the 31 Days of Halloween Horror Movie Challenge. This basically means, starting October 1st, I watch a horror movie every day until we reach the greatest day of the calendar, Halloween. To decide which movies I'll be watching, I found this template on social media, which made it very fun to put this list together. I encourage you to do the same as I did, and be sure to let me know your picks in the comments down below, and it's okay if you don't agree with some movies on the list, as these movies are my personal preference. Also, if you're new to this channel, I'd like to say welcome. I post horror-related content on this channel at least once a week, and I also have a Discord server where I watch movies together with you guys, which is linked in the description. Let's not waste any more time and get straight into my list. On the first day of October, to get me into the Halloween spirit, I will be watching Andre Overdahl's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Over the last couple of years, this movie became one of my favorite comfort watches. I love the whole atmosphere, with everyone walking around in Halloween costumes and the cozy autumn weather. That, combined with these terrifying short stories that are so well executed, gets this list off to a perfect start.
The jangling man is coming.
The second day of Spooktober, I will watch my favorite slasher and maybe even favorite movie in general of all time, Scream. This movie is such a classic, combining brutal slasher horror with comedy to make one of the most memorable franchises in horror movie history. I think I've watched this movie over 10 times already, so adding it to this list for another is more than fine by me.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
For my psychological horror pick, I'm going with The Skeleton Key. I remember watching this movie a long time ago, and all I remember is how mind-blown I was by the ending. After the movie was finished, I wanted to tell everyone I knew how amazing this movie was and force them to watch it. This slow burner of a movie has one of the biggest plot twists I've ever seen, and I can't wait to finally watch it again after all these years. I think for favorite sci-fi horror pick, everyone right now is screaming Alien at their monitor. I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but all I'm gonna say is that there are plenty of other days to come on this list. Instead, I am going for 2020's Psycho Gorman. This movie quickly became a favorite of mine after watching it only less than a year ago for the first time. This movie has some great practical effects and costume design, an absolutely ridiculous storyline, some of the worst comedy you'll ever watch, and probably the most annoying little girl you'll ever encounter. All of that put together gives us this fabulous creature feature that I will be watching live on Discord on the 4th of October.
I want you to meet Psycho Gorman, or PG for short.
I will bathe in your blood.
Don't worry.
Be worried.
For favorite Giallo, or crime horror movie, I'm going with quite a controversial one, picking James Wan's 2020 Giallo movie, Malignant. And I know some people absolutely hated this movie, but I really couldn't care less. I watched this movie for the first time in theaters and actually had a really great experience watching it. I loved how over-the-top and absurd the plot of the movie was, but it was still executed in such a beautifully haunting way. Also, thus far, I have not watched a James Wan movie and was left disappointed afterwards. On day 6, we have to pick a body horror movie, and when I hear that term, there's only one movie I immediately think of, which is, of course, John Carpenter's The Thing. There's almost not a moment in this movie where there's nothing going on. Almost 2 hours of guessing who's actually themselves, and who's an alien mutant monster out to kill everyone else, while being entertained by some of the best practical effects ever shown on the big screen. This movie was a no-brainer to me, and I can't wait to watch it again. For favorite opening scene, I chose a movie that most of you probably wouldn't have picked. I'm going with another James Wan movie by choosing Insidious. I picked this movie not because it has the most beautiful or entertaining intro in horror movie history, but because when this movie came out, I was 12 years old, and this dark, spooky intro, with music straight from the depths of hell, used to scare the absolute shit out of me. It's also been a long time since I've actually rewatched the first part of the Insidious movies, so I'm really stoked for a rewatch. This next category might have been the easiest for me to choose out of all of them. I've watched this movie over 5 times already since it came out in 2022. This movie combines found footage horror perfectly with comedy, while at times still being actually terrifying. I'm talking about the masterpiece that is Deadstream. This movie is such a roller coaster of laughter, being annoyed and actually crapping your pants. It also reminded me a lot of the first Evil Dead movie a lot because of the humor, minimalistic budget, and monster makeup. So if you haven't seen this movie before, please give this hidden gem a go.
Sean, I want you to meet someone.
For day 9, we are choosing a home invasion movie. Personally, I am not too big of a fan of this subgenre, so I just went for The Strangers, as it's the one I enjoyed the most. I had a tough time choosing between 2 movies for day 9, between Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow and the ghost story of The Changeling. As much as I love The Changeling, there was no way of me leaving out one of my favorite Halloween watches of all time. The story of Sleepy Hollow is so beautifully portrayed in this classic movie, and with superb performances from Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, I just couldn't let The Changeling on this list. On day 11, we will be watching a creature feature, and I decided to go with one of the first horror movies I ever saw, Jeepers Creepers. I vividly remember being absolutely terrified seeing the creeper finally being revealed. Also, the scene where the cat lady is taken gives me goosebumps every time. I know this movie got a lot of hate lately because of some news about the director, but I'm basing this list purely on entertainment value, so I'm happy to put Jeepers Creepers on this list. I personally don't really ever watch zombie movies. I guess I'm just not a fan, and in my eyes, all of them kind of have the same story with the same monsters. I can already feel the hate comments under this video, but it's just not my cup of tea, and I respect it if you do actually enjoy them. I do have one zombie movie that I really had a good time with, which is Shaun of the Dead. This zombie flick combines the gory zombie aspect with some awfully good British humor, which is hard to dislike. If I hadn't picked Deadstream, this would have definitely gone on the horror comedy spot, but now I will be watching it on the 12th of October for my zombie movie. Picking a movie for day 13 took me the longest time of all of them. So many movies over the years, and so many different endings. I finally decided to pick 2012's Sinister to take the spot of my favorite ending. The way this movie mysteriously builds up, giving us more and more details of what's going on, makes for a shocking ending that you kinda could have seen coming, but were definitely not expecting. I won't spoil the ending for you, but I do highly encourage you to watch this movie if you haven't done so yet, as this might be one of the scariest movies I have ever watched. Especially the lawnmower scene is something you won't forget anytime soon after watching the movie. The next 5 days were also very hard to pick, as they were very broad options. Picking only one movie from every decade took me a lot of digging and took some hard choices. But these are the final 5 I went with. For the 70s, I'm picking a movie I already told you guys would make an appearance on this list, which is, of course, Ridley Scott's Alien. You'll probably find this movie on every horror list ever, but that is with a good reason. This film has some of the most memorable scenes and maybe the most iconic alien creature in cinema history with the Xenomorphs. This is another movie I haven't watched in a while, so I will happily watch it again soon, probably followed by the new Alien Romulus movie. For the 80s, it became even more difficult, as this year has some of the most iconic horror movies ever made. I decided to go with quite a controversial pick. That's close to my heart. I remember when I just started collecting horror movies, this is one of the first movies I found at a thrift store, and I watched it multiple times that same year. I'm picking a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but surprisingly not the first part. I'm instead going with Part 3, Dream Warriors. This movie is such a fun ride with all the kids having different flaws that they overcome in their dreams, and Freddy takes advantage of that in the worst ways possible. This movie has some of the more creative and over-the-top kills in the Elm Street franchise, in my opinion. Combine that with a great soundtrack by Dokken, and this movie couldn't be easier to be picked by me. The 90s actually didn't leave many options for me, because most movies were already taken by other days, so I went with Clive Barker's Candyman. I don't really ever hear anyone talking about this movie, which is a shame because it really is a piece of art. A terrifying tale about the myth of the Candyman becomes all too real when he is accidentally summoned by a skeptic student. The scene that gives me goosebumps every time is the one in the parking garage in the beginning. Hearing Tony Todd's deep voice echoing through the garage while we can't see who's speaking is just utterly bone-chilling.
Helen.
Yes?
Helen. I came for you.
On the 17th of October, I will be watching Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell. I remember seeing this trailer online where the girl gets a fly up her nose, followed by one of the most memorable jump scare I have seen. After that traumatic experience, I kept postponing to actually see this movie, thinking it would be the scariest movie of all time. Eventually, I gathered all my courage, and I'm so happy I did. This movie creates tension so well and uses its jump scares effectively. Also, I love the kind of dark comedic take on how it's directed by Sam Raimi, and I almost put this movie on the favorite ending spot, but I thought it deserved more praise than just that. For the 2010s pick, I went with the movie that had actually made me feel scared most recently, which doesn't happen often to me, and it is the Argentinian film Aterrados, or Terrified in English. The first half an hour is sure to leave you petrified and stuck in your seat, running for the light switch. The monster in these scenes is one of the most disturbing creatures I have seen in a long while. Towards the end, this paranormal haunting movie can get a bit chaotic, but it never gets boring, to say the least. I will be watching this movie live as well on my Discord server on October 18th, so stay tuned for that. My movie for favorite final girl could be picked for so many other days as well, but I decided to put it here. You're probably expecting some kind of slasher or serial killer horror movie, but I chose to go another route. My pick for this day is The Descent from 2005. I think this movie fits perfectly in this category because, spoiler alert, after the cave expedition gone horribly wrong, Sarah manages to be the only survivor of the group. How she survives depends on which version of the movie you're watching, but I prefer the theatrical version. There are not many horror movies that I particularly hate, as every movie has at least some kind of effort put into it, or parts that can be enjoyed, even if it's so bad it's hard to watch. But, oh god, there is one movie that I dislike so much. I can't be the only one who absolutely despises the 2022 version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. When I knew this movie would be coming out, I refused to watch the trailer to be as surprised as possible going into the movie. God, I wish I just watched the trailer. Choosing a movie which sequel was better than the original was a piece of cake for me, as the sequel is one of my all-time favorites. I'm talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Said No One Ever. I'm actually talking about Child's Play 2. Now don't get me wrong, the first Child's Play was an amazing movie as well, but I just have a soft spot for the 1990 sequel. I am really looking forward to watch this again on VHS on the 21st of October. It was a challenge to come up with a movie which remake was better than the original, but after a lot of thinking, I decided to go with the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. I am comparing the remake with the complete franchise in general, so there may be some original Friday movies that are better than it, but I'm looking at it as a whole. I think the 2009 movie focuses more on Jason and is a fun and entertaining slasher movie, despite it still not being great. I really couldn't think of any other remakes that are executed well, except for The Thing, of course, which I already mentioned. Which remake would you have chosen? For the most overrated horror movie, I chose a movie that apparently half of the internet thinks is overrated, and is not my own personal opinion. As it also fits nicely with the season, I'm picking John Carpenter's Halloween. Don't get me wrong, I still think this is one of the most iconic Halloween movies and slasher icons ever in horror history, but I understand when people say it gets praised more than it actually should. Of course, the movie was groundbreaking when it came out, but it's definitely far from the best movie ever. I'm still not complaining at all to put this on my list. As most underappreciated horror movie, I went for another James Wan movie. This movie used to scare me so bad when I was younger. I remember my older sister talking about it, and of course I had to watch it too. I'm talking about the ghost story of Dead Silence. I really like the urban legend ghost story aspect of this movie, which I will never forget my first experience watching a horror movie. I think I must have been 9 or 10 years old when my parents were watching Wrong Turn, and I decided to join them and have a glimpse. I can vividly remember the scene where the cannibal hillbillies return to their mountain cabin and one of the survivors is hiding under the bed where the cannibal decides to take a nap. Such a tense scene, and it of course scared the crap out of me. After that scene, I remember going upstairs again and laying in bed with as many lights on as possible. Over the years, the Wrong Turn series has become one of my guilty pleasures, becoming worse by every new sequel that is produced. I love it. The last horror movie I have watched while making this video is 2022's Pearl, the prequel to X. I've actually already been wanting to be rewatching Pearl a couple of days after I first saw it. Before I went into it the first time, I had high expectations, and those were definitely met. The way we follow the story of this misfit girl who tries to escape the farm life to become a dancer and becomes completely deranged is beautifully portrayed by director Ty West. I can't wait to watch this one again, and I might stream this one too if you guys would be down for that.
I want to be loved from as many people as possible.
For Best Gateway Horror Movie for Newbies, I'm choosing another of my all-time favorite movies, The Lost Boys. This vampire movie just screams the 80s, following a group of vampires trying to get Michael, who is new in town, to join their group. Michael gets tricked in becoming a vampire too, and we follow this battle of him trying to become normal again. I picked this movie for this category as it isn't too scary, with little jump scares and a great, entertaining plot.
You don't want to miss this.
You smell like garlic.
This next category was quite an odd one to choose, as it is very specific. The only one I could really think of was the scene in Hatchet Part 2, where they are doing it in the woods, when all of a sudden the guy's head gets chopped off by Victor Crowley. So I guess I'll be watching Hatchet 2 on the 28th. The goriest movie I have seen in a long time is probably The Human Centipede, but there is no way I am watching that ever again. So I decided to go with quite a recent movie, in which I really appreciated the practical, gory effects. That movie is Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. I had great fun watching this festive slasher even though the plot was a little bland at some points in the movie. Especially towards the ending, the gore gets turned to another level, which was a pleasure to watch.
No one appreciates subtlety anymore. To go viral, you really need to hit people over the head. Right, Evan?
My favorite horror movie this year was quite an easy pick, as most movies I watched were really disappointing. Also, I'm excluding Beetlejuice, as it isn't available to watch on Blu-ray or VOD where I live yet. My pick for this category is actually Baghead, which I know technically came out on the 28th of December 2023, but I'm counting it for 2024 anyway, so suck it. I haven't really heard anybody talk about this movie at all, which surprised me, as I thought it was really well shot and entertaining to watch. Also, the story was really refreshing, and I love how they revealed the ending of the movie. And finally, last but not least, my favorite movie to watch on Halloween. I will also be streaming this movie on my Discord on Halloween Day itself. Of course, for me, it has to be 2007's Trick or Treat. This movie just does it every time for me. All of the 5 short stories are so entertaining and intertwine each other perfectly. Even thinking about the movie gets me in the Halloween mood every single time. I'm really looking forward to celebrate the best day of the year with this amazing cult classic. So there you have it, my list of 31 movies that I will be watching in the month of October. Be sure to let me know which movies you agree with, and also which movies you would have picked yourself. Also, don't forget to join the Discord by clicking the link in the description to watch some of these movies together with me during the spooky season. I will also keep you guys up to date there for early updates on my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.